You're listening to Drop It Like It's Pop.
Drop it like it's pop. I'm Georgie Statius.
And I'm Vicken Karkukli. This is where two lovers of pop culture come together, unfiltered and unedited, to analyze the biggest stories, moments, and yes, controversies the world of pop has to offer from our very special point of view as media professionals and international event experts.
I'm the PR specialist.
And I'm the journalist.
Join us as we agree to disagree and talk pop till we drop. Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of Drop It Like It's Pop. Episode 5, can you believe it?
Well, you know what? I've been listening to the previous episodes, and every episode I go, who would have thought? So I'm not going to say that this time. I'm not going to say that this time, but I mean, yeah, well, episode 5, it's great. We're excited.
I keep going to say, and just like that, we're at episode 5.
I know, right? Well, that expression is a bit loaded now, so you got to be
Of
careful
course,
with the
exactly.
expressions that you use, right?
Well, that's right. And
Well,
just
and
like that, big died.
oh my God, yes.
Oh.
Well, you know what? And I mean, our friendship may never be the same after this episode. So let's
Well,
see.
that's right. So, dear listeners, welcome. I'm Georgie Statius joining you from Melbourne, Australia, and we've got Vicken Karkukli joining us from Louisville. I know I'm saying that incorrectly. Please correct me. How should I be saying it?
Well, you can say Louisville. It's just people will know that you're not from Louisville if you say Louisville. People here say Louisville, and it's always the giveaway when you're on a plane and you land in Kentucky, and the flight attendant will either say Louisville or Louisville, and that's how you know if they're a local or not. Kentucky is the state.
Kentucky is the state, and you've had the Kentucky Derby or Derby.
Kentucky Derby, and yes, so it was a very, very, very busy weekend here. Interestingly, I live right under the flight path of most airplanes that leave the city, and you could hear a lot of private jets this weekend. Yes, so there was a dinner party at my place, and yeah, we could actually hear all the jets leaving. So we'd go, oh, another one's leaving. And I mean, it's not a nuisance, the likes of which would kind of prevent you from living your life, but you can still hear it.
You can hear the
So
carbon emissions.
you can absolutely, yes. And I think there was I mean, there were a lot of people around the city this weekend. The atmosphere is great, though. I mean, you know a thing or two about horse races coming from Melbourne, Australia. So,
Well, of course, we have the Melbourne Cup here, the first Tuesday of the of November.
mhm.
Yes, we do. Yes,
And
and
I have
actually,
to say,
oh, yes.
no, I just wanted to say those are actually big pop culture moments. I mean, it's more than just the race. It's the fashion, it's the atmosphere, it's the world stopping for a few minutes where you are. I remember when I was at uni in Australia, the
Yes.
world literally stopped for those few minutes that the race was taking place.
Yes. And of course, like the Kentucky Derby, a big part of that is the celebrities that come. And, over the years, we've had a whole range. And some, when they're kind of up and coming, and everyone's like, well, who's that person? I remember one year, I'm sure it was Gigi Hadid came, but it was before she'd kind of really hit it big.
Right.
Brody Jenner was a DJ in one of the celebrity marquees. So that's always a big thing. But it's an interesting one because I always think in Melbourne, you either go to the Cup and there's certainly a movement again, I think there's a bit more of an awareness around horse racing and the Cup these days. So there's actually a group that are called Say Nup to the Cup. Because of, I mean, it's an event that involves animals. But I always found, if you're in Melbourne, you either go to the Cup or you might go to a pub to watch it. But it's a public holiday here. So people often go for picnics or go away for a long weekend sort of thing. But when I've lived interstate, it almost seems bigger there because you leave work at 12, you go to a pub or a hotel for a lunch, and then you don't return to work that day. So it's
But
weird.
it's
It's
only a
almost bigger
holiday.
interstate in a way. I mean, it's
Hmm.
certainly big in Melbourne, but Yeah, I think if you're interstate, you kind of watch it a bit more
It's
actively.
only a holiday in the state of Victoria, though, right?
It's only a holiday, technically, I believe, in Melbourne, in metropolitan Melbourne.
Oh, not even the whole
Yeah,
state.
no.
Oh, very
But I think
interesting.
most of the state take it off. But every country town has their own big races, and then some of those have public holidays associated with the races. So,
Hmm.
that's quite big country racing. But
I mean, I
we
feel that
look at
you
us
and
going on a
I,
side quest already.
no, I know, but that's interesting because they're probably the two biggest races in the world, right? Yours in Melbourne and ours here in Kentucky. Uh,
No, no, you've got one in France. The
Oh, we do.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
Well,
can't remember what it's called.
I'm ticking all the boxes.
You're
But
covering,
they're certainly among the biggest, the
of
one in Melbourne
course,
and the one
of
in
course.
Louisville. So
And it's also around distance and the age of the horses too, which this race is a
yes,
big one for because it's
which we're not gonna pretend we know
we're
enough
not.
about to actually make it a topic on the show.
No,
But
that's
we
right.
do, I do, you were speaking of celebrities, I mean, the only one I actually noticed was here, flicking through the news was Beyonce's mom,
Well,
Miss Tina Knowles was here.
there we go.
Hmm.
I always think of Anna Nicole Smith with the Kentucky Derby. And I do believe an Australian is playing Anna Nicole Smith in the biopic.
Oh,
I'm going to fact check myself. I have a feeling it's Abby Cornish, but I could be she could be playing someone else. Let's have a look.
we might have
Yes,
an episode of
Aussie actress Abby Cornish to star in Anna Nicole Smith biopic. You
very
heard it.
interesting.
Well,
Very interesting
you didn't
topic, the
hear it
biopics
here.
as well. The biopics are a very interesting topic that we'll definitely tackle at some point.
Absolutely. I'd like
Well,
to know
specific.
who would play Tina Arena in her biopic.
Well, I have ideas about that. Well, I, all the more interesting as it kind of ties in with the topic that we've got today, because there always has to be a feud in a biopic, right? There's always has to be that component that
There
kind of
has to
brings the
be.
story to life a little bit.
Exactly. And of course, this episode is called Taking in the Feuds. And we've alluded to some feuds in our previous episodes. And this one, we're really going to deep dive into, well, what is a feud?
Hmm.
What the role of the media is in a feud. And then, of course, look at some of the iconic ones because, I mean, they really cover the whole spectrum of pop culture, don't they? From bands to actresses, actors, families, celebrity families, directors, actors, directors, producers, the whole gambit. But before we get on to that, we're going to do About Last Time.
That's right.
Do you have anything you'd like to clear up from our last episode?
I mean, look, it was our longest episode yet, and I feel that we covered a whole lot of ground about the concept of stand-up comedy and feeling the pressure to be funny. So coming out of the episode, I was surprised that there were still a couple of things I wish I actually talked about. But then you kind of listen and kind of realized that that is a huge topic that we tackled over two episodes, really, because episodes 3 and 4, dear listeners, if you haven't listened yet, we encourage you to tune into those episodes as well. Episode 3 was about comedy, and episode 4 was about stand-up comedy from two different viewpoints, the audience viewpoint and the comics viewpoint. Look, I feel that we covered a whole lot of ground. I mentioned the importance of writing in comedy and the way it tied in with writing in what we do in the media sphere and in journalism specifically, even when it's something that feels informal and spontaneous. And I felt that there's this format that's been talked about a whole lot because there have been so many different international versions, which is in France, we call it LOL. We might call it LOL in different
Yeah.
countries. I'm not quite sure, but it's the Prime Video show where a bunch of comics are actually brought together in a closed space and have to make each other laugh. And the first one laughing, well, every person laughing gets eliminated. And until, the last one standing wins because they haven't laughed. So I think that show a whole lot of controversies have ensued from that show, specifically in France, because one stand-up comedian, Blanche Gardin, who's a very popular one at the moment, came out against the show and said, considering the amount of money that she had been offered to actually participate in the show, she really called out Prime Video for, just throwing money at people for something that in the end is supposed to be a charity gig because the winner wins some money for their charity. But at the same time, all the comedians in there make a gazillion times more money than the money that goes to charity in the end. So she really called out the hypocrisy of that. And that controversy aside, because we were very honest about the shows that we found funny or not, I have to say that that's the kind of show that doesn't even make me smile, because that's when I realize the shortcomings of a stand-up comedian when they're in a space where they have to improvise in a weird way. And the goal of the show kind of is a premise that I feel for me kind of really reveals that comedy is really all about writing and being articulate and the right timing. And I find that show, I mean, France has had a few seasons, and I think probably the last couple of seasons, the first one had a novelty factor, but I think the show jumped the shark really fast. And we'll probably have it at one point a segment about these shows that have gone too far, that we're like, oh, that's one too many seasons, or even albums with artists that are like, was that the album that we didn't need for that from that specific one?
Oh, I would love a jump the shark episode.
Well, let's do it. I mean, we'll
Let's
talk
do
to
it.
our producers and the team behind the show and see if they're okay with it.
We'll see if we can schedule it in.
That's right. And so, yes, LOL, there have been very many versions, very high profile hosts. I mean, if you think Graham Norton in the UK, in Ireland, sorry, not in the UK, Graham Norton in Ireland, Rebel Wilson. We might mention Rebel Wilson further down the line today. In Australia, Trevor Noah in South Africa, really high profile hosts. But I have opinions about that show. I'm not quite sure.
For once, I don't have an opinion because I haven't watched. Do you know I haven't watched the show, and I don't even think I've seen maybe one like ad for it. So it was obviously on a streaming service or a subscription service here that I don't have. So that whole concept is quite foreign to me. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it kind of has taken away the magic almost of stand-up, and you've seen too much behind the curtain.
Yes, and they drag it out so much because ultimately you find out that these people only spend a few hours together in that space, and they turn those few hours into 6 episodes of 45 minutes. And you think, don't really drag it out that much. Does it really deserve a treatment like that? So that was my little thing about LOL or LOL or whatever you want to call it. No judgment if people like it. I mean, it keeps coming back, so I'm assuming a whole heap of people are enjoying that.
Anything else about last time?
I do have one very specific one. We spoke about comedians being, particularly on talk shows or even awards shows, we spoke about comedians being put on the spot. And I feel like we could have gone a step further about people who are being put on the spot fighting back. And I mean, there was a whole heap said about that, but specifically for talk shows, I mean, if you search the internet and look for videos of the greatest clapbacks and comebacks of talk show guests to their hosts, you'll find a few gems there. Probably, I think there's a few really good one with Chelsea Handler. I used to love Chelsea Handler's show. I thought her comedic timing was very spot on and impeccable. I haven't really followed her in the past few years, but when she had her show, I felt there were interesting situations there. And certainly a few guests have come for her whenever they felt the questions weren't spot on. But think about Ellen and Dakota Johnson, I
Oh,
mean, Dakota Johnson was kind of put on this pedestal for being one of the first ones to so firmly and clearly,
yeah,
and with humor as well, for
yes,
calling out Ellen DeGeneres whenever she was put on the spot by her. And it kind of became this give and take between them.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Just a side note, Chelsea Handler, of course, former partner of Joe Coy. Joe,
Hmm.
is that Joe Coy?
Joe
Yes.
Coy,
Who we
yes.
spoke about the last one. Yes, Dakota Johnson, yes. And I think the way she went back to Ellen really made Ellen's comment, it really highlighted how much Ellen was trying to embarrass Dakota Johnson. And perhaps if she had just let it go, it wouldn't have been so striking in how I mean, just how childish and how cheap the shot is that Ellen does to some of these guests, where she does try and embarrass them. And I think Dakota Johnson going back to her with her facts. I mean, there was the one about where she, Ellen said, "You didn't invite me to your birthday party," and Dakota says, "Yes, I did." And she said, "Well, who did you?" And she said, "I asked your producer." She had the facts to back it up, which meant Ellen couldn't squirm. She had nowhere to hide. So. Uh,
I think
I'd like to
it
give some
raises.
flowers to Dakota Johnson for her,
Mhm.
pushing back, but in a dignified way.
Look, it also raises the meanness in humor that we're willing to accept. And maybe before we move on to the topic today, we can also trace it back to clowns. I do not have a passion for clowns. And I remember when I was a child in kindergarten, in France, kindergarten, starts at 3, ends at
Yes.
6 years old, and then you move on to elementary school. They would take us to the circus.
Mm,
And they would take us to the circus, and here I was watching a show with clowns being so mean to each other,
mm,
and I would see everyone else around me laughing their heads off, and I just didn't get it because I felt the meanness more than I felt the
yes.
humor. And clown humor, for the most part, was always based on one being
Ridicule.
mean with the other.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's never something that I responded positively to. And I think it kind of also was one of the formative items of my sense of humor growing up, realizing that I can only take so much meanness and I can only take so
Yes.
much aggressiveness in the
Yes.
humor that I enjoy.
Gosh, we could have a whole episode on clowns. Maybe we should retitle this
Let's
pod.
not, please let's not do that.
Maybe we
Okay,
should
I'll call the
retitle.
producers and tell them to can that one, nip
I
it in
think
the
we
bud.
should. I think we should retitle this podcast. Maybe we could have an episode on uh, just on clowns, because we will move on, because I'm really keen to get into our topic of feuds today. I know a lot of people who have a really strong aversion to clowns, and I mean, I laughed when you said it, and I shouldn't laugh because it is real. This either fear or hatred of clowns. What I would like to ask you is, where do you stand on two things? Where do you stand on Ronald McDonald? And as a French person, where do you stand on mime artists?
Hmm. Wow, I was not expecting those two questions. Ronald McDonald, I've never actually really thought about that. Is
Mm.
it still even a thing? I live in the city of
No,
Colonel
he's not
Sanders.
around anymore. And I think there's a lot of articles about why he's not around.
Yeah, and I live in the city of Colonel Sanders because
Of
Louisville is the
course.
city of KFC. So there are, a few Colonel Sanders statues, like at the airport. One of the first people to greet you is Colonel
Does he have his
Sanders.
does he have his 11 herbs and spices?
No, but it's a bench and you can sit next to him. And
Oh.
there's a sign on it that says, please do not sit on the colonel's lap.
Okay, we
So
need a photo to put on our Instagram page of you sitting next to the colonel.
I probably do already have one
Perfect.
because
Dig it out.
I always greet the colonel whenever I arrive at Muhammad Ali International Airport in Louisville.
There's a lot happening at that airport between
Right?
Muhammad Ali and the colonel.
Yeah, well, it's the city of Muhammad Ali,
Of
Louisville.
course, of
So
course.
Yes, so I do not have an opinion. I must have blocked Ronald McDonald out
Fair
this
enough.
entire time and just blast from the past, you
Yeah.
mentioning it today.
Sorry.
Mime artists, I think I do not come from that culture. I
Yes.
was born in the 1970s. I
Yeah.
think that culture of mime artists in France had long gone and belonged to a different kind of era.
Yes.
And it's not something that is brought back. I mean, mime marceau is referred to occasionally, but it's not considered to be one of the founding elements of either our theater or our performance arts.
Yes.
I do not have the expertise to elaborate on this. I'm not going to lie, but these are not really, they've never been part of my
Yes.
immediate cultural environment.
Well, and of course, last year marked well, it would have been the 100th birthday of Marcel Marceau last year. He was born in 1923 in
Hmm.
Strasbourg, France. The reason I asked that is because I do know some people who don't like clowns, and that extends to mime artists. So I was curious. But so thank you for your about last time. And I hope you don't have nightmares of Ronald McDonald tonight.
You go now.
Well, I just have three that I'd like to clear up. And the first was I could not remember the name of the sort of, the brains behind, well, I shouldn't say the brains, but the creator and producer of Saturday Night Live. And of course, it was Lorne Michaels, who stretched from 1975 to 1980 and then 1985 to present day. And of course, the years Julia Louise-Dreyfus, those 3 years she was on SNL, was not when Lorne Michaels was there. It was
Mhm.
between that hiatus of 1980 and
Oh, I
1980.
didn't know that. I didn't know she
Mm,
was there during the hiatus.
that's right, and that plays into the person producing it at the time was perhaps not the best fit. The second one was I couldn't remember which oceans it was that Sandra Bullock, Kate Blanchett, Rihanna, Helena Bonham Carter was in, and it was Ocean's 8. I think you did correct me, but I just wanted
I
to.
did correct you on
You
that.
did. Thank you. And then the third one is I made a big boo boo because I was talking about Hannah Gadsby's Nanette series, and I said I think Nanette was named after their grandmother. Well, I was obviously confusing Curtis Stone's restaurants that he names after his grandmothers, and Nanette definitely wasn't. The real Nanette was actually a barista that Hannah Gadsby encountered at a cafe who made them feel very comfortable. The two never spoke, but their interaction was enough to leave its mark on Gadsby. And Gadsby went on to say, I've never seen her since. I assume she's still kicking about somewhere. She was just an older lady who I would normally love to talk to, but because of what I represented, we didn't. You know, when someone looks at you like you're scum of the earth. Um, Gadsby said that if you'd seen the live version, you would have learned more about Nanette. But in the version that went to air on Netflix, that segment had been cut out. So it didn't have that explanation. And originally, Gadsby wanted to build her whole show around Nanette, but then realized she couldn't. She said, no offense to Nanette, she might have just had a tough day. I was purely projecting. I feel pretty bad because she was just getting on with her life. It's one thing for me to open up this viral sensation upon myself, but she's just doing her thing. So, yes, just clarification on how the series was named Nanette or the show was named Nanette.
Why would Gatsby think that Nanette thought they were the scum of the earth, though?
Oh,
Is that what you said?
yes, because of the look that she gave Hannah Gadsby.
Oh, got
She said,
it.
when you get that look from someone that you know
Right.
what they're thinking of you. Yeah.
Understood.
Yes. So
Well, there must have been plenty of looks going on in the topic that we are tackling today,
that's a perfect segue.
right?
Right. Feuds. Gosh,
Where do we even start? Well, it takes two to tango, I'll give you that.
it takes two to tango.
So let's see how we side when it comes to all the feuds that we're going to be mentioning today. I think this is the most exciting component because we've had many conversations about so many things. And I'm incredibly curious to see how, and we kind of had that. give and take during our first episode, which was the Taylor Swift episode,
Yes.
where clearly we do not feel the same about Tay-Tay and the latest album and so many different things. And Taylor is no stranger to a feud herself. So we are going to bring her back as a guest star. The show is not about her today, but it may well be mentioned a few times that she's had feuds with people. Shall we start with what a feud actually is?
Yes, and I'm slightly terrified that we're going to feud over whose side we're. Oh, gosh, I can't even get it out. I'm so terrified.
You're nervous. You're nervous. I understand that. Well, that's why I led with our friendship may never be the same after this.
It may never be the same.
Look at us. Should we just end the show now?
It's
So
been
what was your
lovely
pop
knowing you.
moment of the week?
Thank you for listening.
No.
Okay,
It's
here we
too
go.
important. It's been too important in our friendship to actually just not talk
Yes.
about it.
And I guess, and the thing with feuds is there's so many layers and types of feuds. And, there's the feuds that are genuine feuds that the participants generate themselves. There's the feuds where they're orchestrated by the media. There's the feuds that are orchestrated by producers or directors of shows. There's feuds within, there's private feuds that then become public. But I was, thinking about that sort of fascination of the public with feuds. And I was thinking, where does this come from? And I mean, could it be a stretch to say it dates back to, those kind of gladiator tussles in the Colosseum in Rome, that entertainment, that sport of people fighting and feuding. Obviously, we're not talking about physical. Well, some of these feuds turn physical, but that public fascination with watching people feud.
Mm-hmm. I think absolutely. I think the public eye on the feud is a very important component. I think looking at all the definitions, because we do a bit of research before we go into these topics, but looking at the definitions, and I'm not going to read from a dictionary here, I think one of the main components of feuds is also the longevity, that it is something that has a duration that goes beyond just a standard quarrel or a disagreement. And that's when the media come in. We were talking about dragging before, but that's when the component of dragging. So is a feud just a quarrel that the media turned into a feud because they dragged it? Or is it, an actual long-standing disagreement and quarrel between two parties?
Absolutely. And I know we've already talked about Taylor, and I don't think it's a surprise to people listening of what feud we might talk about there. But like, I actually see that as a case of, and we'll get into it more, but I think some of these instances, it's not two tangoing, it's someone being bullied, but then the media portrays them as being in a feud.
Right.
So, I'm keen to get your thoughts as we go through this from a journalist point of view, is the role the media play in creating these feuds for media purposes. And then, the collateral being, these are still, well, they're entertainers or they're characters in reality shows. They're still people. They're still people with feelings, people who are impacted by these feuds. And that role of these feuds then becoming entertainment.
Yes. Well, I think they're the gift that keeps on giving, in terms of everyone needs to throw in their, take on the situation. And that's when it can spiral out of control. I think what was also interesting in the research that I did, and I kind of felt that way as well, is that there is a family or clan component to the feud. Historically, what we called a feud was long-standing quarrels, disagreements between separate opposing clans or families.
Yes.
And I think the concept of family is also going to be very interesting, because we spoke of not really family, and we'll come back to the concept of family in pop culture, but we spoke about the concept of community, and we spoke about the concept of fandom. And I really liken the concept of community and fandom in the context of feuds to the concept of family and clan, because you support an artist or a public persona as you would a member of your family. And we've certainly seen that with the fandoms of recent
Yes,
years being so protective of the artists that they follow, that these conversations also take a life of their own long after a feud may have been resolved between the two parties allegedly feuding.
exactly. Absolutely. And I mean,
So I'm
some of these
no,
feuds
no,
we
you
don't.
go ahead. You go
Oh, I
ahead.
was just going to say some of these feuds we don't even know are happening until years later. I mean, Hall
Right.
and Oates, I had no idea about the feud with Hall and Oates, and one of them actually, I think, having a restraining order out against the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you've got the very public ones. You've got the ones that people use to, to their benefit and to perhaps increase their public profile, progress their career. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, because I think some have to make the most of a bad situation.
Make lemonade.
Make lemonade, make
Mm-hmm.
lemon cocktails.
Well, I don't have a cocktail for you, but I have a long list of feuds that I want to have your opinion on. So I'm going to go into this, and in a segment that I would like to call No Pressure, whose side are you on?
I need a little.
Look,
Oh,
I'm going
okay.
to start with an easy one. I just because these have been publicized and and I'm going to give my opinion as well. I'm not just
Okay.
putting you on the spot, but
Okay.
I'm going to give you my opinion as well. And we're going to come back to some of them as examples in our,
Yes,
analysis of the phenomenon of
of
feud.
course.
And
And we
uh,
should say these alleged feuds.
yes, well, some of them not so alleged, but let's see. I'm going to start with a very easy one. I
Mm.
feel is should I go into the list now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Well, let's start with an easy one. Where do you stand on Danny Minogue versus Sharon Osbourne?
Look, I am Team Danny on this because I don't actually see this as a feud. I see this as Sharon Osbourne attacking Danny in
Hmm.
in settings like on the Graham Norton show. And I mean, we saw Sharon Osbourne taking easy, cheap shots at people while she was in the big celebrity Big Brother house recently in the UK. And I find if your feud is this one-sided, I feel like sort of Sharon's having this feud with Danny, but Danny's not really even participating. It's to me it's quite desperate. Having said that, I would never want Sharon Osbourne coming after me. So yes, I'm Team Danny on that one.
I agree with you. I have to say, I have come to respect Danny Minogue a whole lot. I
Mm,
think she's an incredibly articulate public speaker. I
yes,
love her interviews. She's always cool, calm, and collected. I think she's incredible when it comes to interviews. And I think she's always taken the high road for many, many things that she's gone
yes,
through. Her first marriage, being the daughter-in-law of a former prime minister of
of course,
Australia, the relationship with her mother-in-law back in the day.
yes,
I felt she was always very classy and always very contained about what
yeah,
she let out.
yeah,
Um, and obviously, we spoke about Sharon and her treatment of Danny last week in the comedy segment because we referenced the Graham Norton show. But I agree with you on this, and I feel
yes.
Danny is a very has a very classy way of approaching this as well.
That's right. I mean, Danny doesn't give any oxygen to this
Hmm.
feud, and I would say that with inverted commas. She doesn't feed it. She doesn't give oxygen to it, so it's never going to actually go anywhere because it kind of just stops. Uh, but I think that's a good example of a feud, and I'm going to make a judgment call on here that I think is based on jealousy. Um,
Right.
of when they were judges on X
X
Factor,
Factor,
X Factor
UK, X
in the
Factor
UK.
UK.
Exactly. And of course, you've got
Hmm.
Danny, the younger judge, perhaps getting more attention. You've got Sharon, who's trying to get attention. And so it was very easy to make these quips, but Sharon's no stranger to making these statements about people.
And I think it was a great component to the narrative of X Factor UK. I think having the two main women, the two women on the panel, on the judging panel, really, have this very difficult relationship. And we've seen it. And I will definitely want your opinion further down the line.
Yes.
About women being pitted against each other and
Exactly.
how the media and popular culture really
Yes.
feels that two women cannot coexist in the same space without feuding.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes back to Joan Crawford and Bette Davis and their feud. And there's a really good quote from Harper's Bazaar I want to reference. But yes, that was where my thought went to with them on the panel is I'm sure it wasn't by accident they were both put on a panel. It makes for
Mm-hmm.
good TV. The show gets extra promotion because it's mentioned in newspapers, it's mentioned on Talkback. The story of the feud creates more publicity. People then want to tune in to see these two judges perhaps not getting along. So, I think it's that whole orchestration of these not manufactured feuds, but yeah, there's no accident or chance in how these situations come together.
And it's kind of like bringing two personalities into a space and seeing what happens. I
Yes.
think there's also a component of, as we said, because these spaces are so specific in the way they create environments where everything is heightened and everything takes a life of its own. And it was very interesting to see then when Sharon quit and Cheryl Cole joined the panel that everyone was expecting that it was going to be the catfight of all catfights between Cheryl and Danny, and that never happened.
No.
And I think people were really thrown off guard and
Yes.
thought, oh, that is an example of two women. I mean, do we even need examples? But these two women coexisting, and I'm sure
Correct.
there were instances of the media trying to pit them
Yes.
against each other,
Yes.
really unsuccessfully.
Absolutely. But even that term catfight,
I
I mean,
know,
he's
I
so
know.
steeped in sexism. But
I
anyway.
know, and as I was saying it, I thought to myself, you're going to say something about it, and rightfully so,
Yeah,
because what does that even mean? But
correct.
let's
Let's move
go
on
through
in the
the list
list.
because the idea was really to go, but I
Yes.
just
We'll,
really wanted to stop and give Danny her flowers because I
yes.
think she's an underrated,
Yes.
incredible woman. So I
Yes.
just wanted to say
We'll
that.
go yep, we'll do fast ones for the next ones.
All right, Fast and Furious.
Otherwise, we
Katy
might be here
Perry.
for another 10 hours.
That's right. Katy Perry versus Taylor Swift.
Oh, see, I don't even like I mean, obviously I'm a Swiftie, but I actually don't take sides on that one because to me it's a bit of a nothing feud.
Mm-hmm. Mariah Carey versus Jennifer Lopez.
Well, I didn't even know there was a feud between those two. So there we go. But I'd always be Team J Lo. Although I do like Mariah. I think she is hilarious.
I love Mariah. Pink versus Christina Aguilera.
Oh, see, another feud. I mean, I need to get more into my music feuds. I don't know enough about that one, but I'll just say Team Pink anyway.
Terry Hatcher versus all the other Desperate Housewives.
I know this is your favorite. I know which one you'll be on this one. Once again, I mean, I'm intrigued by that one. I never watched, well, no, I shouldn't say I never watched it. I did watch it a few times, Desperate Housewives. I don't know. I'm going to go with the numbers. So I'm going to go with the whole cast.
I'm Team Terry Hatcher. Taraji P. Henson versus Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, my. Look, I will vote anyone against Oprah Winfrey. So definitely Taraji.
Got it. I agree with you on this one. Eminem versus Mariah Carey.
Oh, well, once again, I don't know enough about this one. I feel I should. I love Eminem, but I know he does make some pretty interesting comments. Oh gosh. Gee, I'm gonna have my homework after this episode. I don't
I'll
feel
send
I'm
you the
fully
list.
qualified now to be part of this feud's episode.
Well, I mean, Eminem versus Mariah Carey is Eminem referencing Mariah Carey and reporting on some things that says never happened. And Mariah Carey came out with a diss track that we are going to talk about diss tracks. Um, and the
Yes.
track was called Obsessed.
Yeah.
And the premise of the song was, why are you so obsessed with me?
Love it. Well, then I love her
Mhm.
response. I mean, I love Eminem, but I love her response.
That's right. So Madonna versus Cher.
Oh, tell me more about that one.
Well, Cher came out years ago in the 1980s, and there's videos about this on YouTube. And she says that they're fine now, and they've been photographed together. And the idea was that Cher said Madonna was mean for no good reason, that she didn't have to be mean. And Cher was friends with Sean Penn when Sean Penn and Madonna started dating. And so she was like, well, I've been to dinner at their place and she's just mean. Why does she have to be mean? And Cher went really far because she called Madonna the C word.
Oh, okay. Because
Mm.
before you said that last bit, I was going to say that, I mean, people should be able to say if someone's mean, I mean, gosh, we don't all get along. We don't all love each other. We don't all think the same of each other. So, I think it comes down to what context Cher says that in. Like, was there a need to say she was mean? And then, of course, if you then bring in the context of, well, she's saying that being, Sean Penn's friend, uh, and that's where I think sometimes comments can get taken out of context. I mean, I'd like to. Well, you may have it on your list, so but if not, I'll come back to it. Of someone who made some disparaging remarks about someone that just wasn't necessary. Our good friend Aretha Franklin,
Okay.
but we'll come to her.
I do want to say this about Madonna, though, having been a fan of Madonna's since the 1980s, is that Madonna's fans are well aware of Madonna's personality. And they
Yes.
like Madonna and they love Madonna and they support Madonna in spite of that. Madonna can be quite dismissive. We've seen her be dismissive with fans in certain interactions during talk shows and interviews. And I think we just cut her some slack considering everything she's done and all the communities that she's supported. And I think there's an awareness among the Madonna fandom that,
Mm.
you can also not always be a softie, and
Yes.
not that being a softie is wrong,
No,
but
but she has a certain style. Yes.
she does.
But you know what? It kind of comes back to that comment you made in one of the episodes around, is someone like Taylor Swift, you can't say anything bad against her. Um, you know, are there people like Madonna that if Cher says she's mean, it becomes a thing that might not have happened if it was a lesser star? And you interpret these. I think it's very hard to sort of not have bias in these feuds when you're viewing them, because you do inherently have a loyalty to someone in the feud if you know them well. So yeah, I think that's a hard one. If that's where the feud came from, of her saying she was mean, I'd need to know more context. But we'll move on.
And I'm all for letting opinions exist. I think a
Yes.
lot of Madonna fans have let all of these, some of them were pretty harsh and some of them
Mm.
were pretty terrible, all the stuff that was thrown at Madonna through the years. But it doesn't take away the how legitimate what Cher feels is.
Exactly,
Because Cher is
exactly.
also a very articulate artist who's been around
Yeah.
the block and back a few times and had the ups and had the downs. And
Yes.
I love how articulate Cher is. I think she
Mm.
doesn't get enough credit, and she's a very funny, funny, funny
Very
woman
funny.
too.
Yes.
Let's run through the list. What do you think of Taylor versus Kanye?
Well, I have very strong opinions of this, because I don't think that is a feud. I think that is a pure case of a young girl being bullied and embarrassed and humiliated, and taken her opportunity to receive award taken away from her. I think Taylor's response is her taking control of the narrative on it. So I'm going to reframe that, and I don't think it actually is a feud. because I think by saying it's a feud, it actually takes away the magnitude of what Kanye did to Taylor. And it kind of drags Taylor into it. She didn't ask to be in this feud. I mean, no one asks to be in a feud, but I do think she has, she talks about how much it impacted her. She didn't want to leave the house. And I think we forget sometimes these are still real people. She was a young person on the stage, and it's just, if that happened at the Oscars or with other artists, I think it would have been viewed differently. I think she was an easy target, and the other person that sort of was collateral damage in all of that was Beyonce, because she got dragged into it, and that put her in a really awkward position, because he did this sort of, not on behalf of her, but kind of was doing this for her by saying she should have won it, whether you think she should have or not. So yes, that's where I stand on Taylor and Kanye.
I think you raised a very interesting point, and this has been highly documented by MTV itself, because they know what happened, because they were there. It was their award show. So it was a godsend for them, really, to be able to then go back to this and say, this is what happened. This is what went down behind the scenes. This is how we damage. I mean, talk about sending spin doctors and PR people into a frenzy backstage and having them come up with a solution. And I think a lot of people think that, because I don't know if people remember when that happened, Taylor had won for female video and Beyonce was nominated for Single Ladies, put a ring on it, for the same category. And I think it was You Belong With Me that Taylor won for. But at the end of the show, Beyonce won for Video of the Year for Single Ladies. So she lost in the Best Female Video category, a category that no longer exists because it's gender neutral now, the MTV Video Music Awards. And then Beyonce won Video of the Year, rightfully so. I think Single Ladies is one of the best music videos ever made. And that's when Beyonce actually brought Taylor onto the stage and said, I remember winning my first award with Destiny's Child. It was a moment. Now I would like Taylor to have her moment. We think it was something spontaneous that Beyonce did, but really that was something that was orchestrated backstage, because we're like, how can we make this wrong right? So it felt very spontaneous. It was interesting to find out what had gone down behind the scenes. But going back to the feuds, I mean, Taylor and Kanye is one, but what do you think of Taylor and Kim Kardashian?
Well, I think Kim was complicit in, the whole fake phone call business. She played a role in the treatment of Taylor, not on the night, but the subsequent documented things that happened. And I know you're alluding to the song on her album, that obviously has the KIM in capitals, so it's sort of thinly veiled, I think. My immediate response to that song was, oh, are we going there again? Haven't we all moved on? But that's a judgment. Who am I to say Taylor has to move on and Taylor can no longer sing about this thing that obviously really impacted her? And I think it's a slippery slope if we start making judgments on what people can and can't write about and can and can't sing about, even if we as the public have moved on.
I say if you're gonna write a song about it, make it good. Because I heard that song and I was like, what is going on?
What I will say is, if you're going to do that, if you're going to bring something like that back into the public eye when everyone kind of had not forgotten, everyone had moved on. And I don't doubt that, knowing Taylor and her team and how thorough they are and how good at sort of marketing and strategy, you've got to be ready for the consequences. So if you bring this back up, you need to think what will the repercussion be, and then what will the repercussion and consequence of that would be. So, and I don't have any doubt that would have been thought through. So, you don't just drop a song and kind of put it out there. I do think some people do, but if you reignite these feuds in the public sphere, because that's what the song's doing, you need to be ready for the consequences, and you need to be prepared and have kind of thought 2, 3, 4 steps down the reaction of that.
I say, don't act like a victim in a problem you created.
Oh, 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 I disagree, because I don't think Taylor. Oh no.
I'm just talking about the reignition here.
Oh,
If
correct.
I am
Sorry.
not talking about the whole thing, but
Yes, yes.
this
Uh,
very specific song is reigniting something that people had moved on from, as you were saying a second
yes.
ago. And I am just talking about the reignition. Now, if there is some backlash, and the same thing happened, I'm going to reference this very fast. The same thing happened with Pink and Christina Aguilera, because a lot was said about them burying the hatchet and Pink appearing on The Voice alongside Christina Aguilera as a guest coach. And both of them on Saturday, on Watch What Happens Live, your favorite show with Andy Cohen, both of them appearing on the show and saying, we're moms now, we're adults, we were kids, we were super green. Um, we've moved on from this. We have come to terms with the reasons why we didn't really understand each other back in the day. And then this video comes out a few months ago of Pink going back to some of her early work, and as you do, they have those comment videos that you'll play her old videos to her, and she'll give her opinion. And about the Lady Marmalade, because that's when Christina and Pink collaborated at the turn of the century, really. We're talking
Yes,
about 2001.
yes,
Um, so that collaboration, uh, Pink went back about it and said, Little Kim and Maya were nice, meaning Christina wasn't. And then
yes,
she got a whole heap of comments on socials and had to come out again and say this and that. And then it kind of felt like Pink, who's this incredibly articulate artist who's got nothing to prove anymore, it kind of
yes,
felt like she was acting as like a victim in a problem that she had created, because she reignited the thing
yes,
by making that comment, that specific comment
yes,
on that video.
yes, yes. But what, yes. But what I'm going to say to that is, I think we all have been in situations where, um, we've been in uncomfortable situations. Whether it's a work situation,
Yes.
and even years later, you can still have those feelings of how you felt at that time. And if then you're triggered, so if she's, being shown videos and she's got a comment on them and it takes her back to that place, I can easily see how she would make that comment.
But genuinely have a question for you, being a PR specialist.
Mm,
Isn't it a bad PR move to actually go back to that? And we all have feelings that we don't air all the time.
yes,
Isn't it a bad PR move to go back? I mean, I'm talking about the Taylor Swift
yes,
song Thank You, Amy, and I'm also talking about, Pink potentially going back, or
yes,
Sharon Osbourne on the talk show that she was on in the States. And let's
mm,
be honest, people don't know who Danny Minogue is in the
no,
States.
yes,
If you watch that video of Sharon Osbourne, and that's interesting because that's work for them. That is work for them. So it's a work situation like any other
yes,
work
yes,
situation. And so they were asked on the panel that Sharon was on, the talk show with Sarah Gilbert and Aisha Tyler
yes.
and all those other women. They
The
were asked,
the view.
right, have you ever been in a situation where they didn't mention the word bullying, but have you ever been in a situation of direct competition in the
Mm,
workplace? And Sharon said yes and went on for like 4 minutes
yes,
about Danny Minogue. We knew, I mean, reading into the words that she was saying, obviously she was talking about Danny Minogue. So
yes,
what is interesting, and you were mentioning the workplace, is that we are talking about work instances.
yes. No, absolutely, and that's why I think I could imagine Pink, if that was an uncomfortable moment for her. But I can see how she would be triggered, and you would make those comments. I'm not saying they're
Mhm.
the right comments to make. I see that situation different to Sharon Osbourne, because Sharon Osbourne just seems to constantly be this attack against Danny. Pink, I think she's kind of saying, oh yeah, no, I don't know. Ugh. I mean, I'm kind of talking myself out of my argument as I
This
don't
is
know,
a
I'm talking
very
myself
good,
around
but
my argument.
this is a very good instance of different strokes for different folks, because we also have some loyalty to some people that we want to find circumstances where we will excuse them potentially more. And I do exactly the same, where we will excuse them more. We will find excuses for them when we won't for other people. So I am more of a fan of Christina Aguilera's, and I know that much like Madonna, a lot of people who support and have supported Christina Aguilera for the past 24 years, uh, they know what Christina Aguilera is like. And she
Yes.
also has this character, and she can come across as, a little dismissive and a little holier than thou, but it's still, where does your loyalty stand in all this?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, um, yeah, absolutely. Where does your loyalty stand? Also, where are we? I mean, it's a bit different when they're saying it sort of flat out, but the role of media in and which lens media are putting on feuds to set someone up on a pedestal and portray someone else as the villain, because you always
Mm-hmm.
have a villain and the goodie in one of these feuds, which is often orchestrated by the media. I mean, I think it comes down to, and I'm not going to, obviously, I don't know enough about the Pink feud, but do they feel the public need to actually know what went on? What's the purpose of sort of saying these comments? And what's the consequence? And if you're going on a show and having not seen the Pink one, but I mean, I'm kind of thinking about, Vogue's looks, where they take an actor through a lookbook of their, fashion looks over the years, and they talk to each outfit. If you're going into that situation, you can be pretty sure they're going to show you some of your iconic things, and you'd be thinking about, how am I going to address this? And I wouldn't doubt there'd be some PR strategy amongst that. But I mean, I think it would be hard to be someone in the public eye where everything you say is monitored, it's captured, it's reprinted, it's put on, memes, it's put on YouTube. So I kind of, if it's sort of a one-off thing, then you go, okay. But yes, it is around, what's that purpose? What are you trying to achieve from this? Are you wanting to get your point of the story, your point of view across, and your side of the story? Are you wanting to humiliate someone? Are you wanting to get extra press? Whatever it is, I think it comes down to the intent, I would say, maybe
I
rather than
think,
the comments, but what the intent of those comments are in the public eye.
which is why I say don't act like a victim in a problem you created, because thinking that Pink is an incredibly articulate artist, who has been around for a long, long time, and I believe knows exactly what she's doing. I think that it's not so much about her making the comment, it's the response afterwards,
Yes.
trying to defend herself. If you are going to go as far as airing that dirty laundry again, or saying this is something that triggers me and this is something that I still feel trauma from all those years later, I think you should be in a position where, instead of acting like a victim in a problem you created, standing up and going all the way and
Yes.
saying, yes, although we've reconciled and we've made amends and buried the hatchet, I still carry some of that with me. And that's why I said that. I say own it instead of trying to deflate it.
Yes. No, and I was actually going to ask you your view on them. How do they respond? And I love that. I agree. If you're going to say it, back it, you know.
Yes.
Um,
Look, I absolutely. And as I was telling this, the previous show came back to my mind, and we've spoken about how personal we can get into whenever we get into some topics, and we both work in environments that are sensitive environments, public
yes.
relations, media operations, journalism, how much of your own of your own career's moments that have defined you, can you air on, a podcast that we're doing to give a professional opinion on some of these pop culture moments? So I feel that, and I want to go back to that in the previous show, I tend to try and give examples that stay generic without getting too
Yes.
personal, but sometimes it's hard to not get personal. And
Yes.
I feel in my career that that motto, "Don't act like a victim in a problem you created," has
Yes.
really kind of saved me in the past few years in
Yes.
trying to gain a perspective. There's also another one that is very interesting because there's always this component of sensitivity. And I read somewhere for people who it's often self-diagnosed if you're hypersensitive, and it
Mhm.
seems that 1 out of every 5 people
Mm.
can be considered to be hypersensitive.
Yes.
um, there's this question that has been hovering above kind of everything I've done in the past few years. Whenever you feel like your feelings are getting the best of you,
Yes.
is what would you do if you weren't hypersensitive? And it kind of
Mm.
resets the focus. So I think that everyone has this kind of sensitivity that they have to
Mm.
deal with, but you cannot play the sensitivity card at one stage and not own it for the next
Correct.
ones.
Exactly.
So I think it's
Yes.
being consistent with yourself. And I was
Absolutely.
actually quite surprised considering how incredibly consistent and articulate Pink is. She would
Yes.
actually play that card after
Yes.
having uttered those words.
Mm.
So let's continue with
We're really moving through the list fast.
I know, no, but there is another one that I want to talk about, which is,
Yes.
I mean, it's probably one of the biggest ones in the past few years because no one saw it coming. That's Kim Cattrall and Sarah Jessica Parker.
Look, I find that one really interesting because that has been forced out into the public eye by Kim Cattrall. And if I'm not mistaken, and you please correct me, I believe did her brother passed away. Sarah Jessica Parker tweeted, I think, a condolence message. Kim Cattrall responded with, "My mum always told me to be careful of you," or something like that.
Oh, it was more than that.
It was more than that. So that is one that the media, that Kim Cattrall has pushed out. Sarah Jessica Parker has, on the whole, I think, stayed quite dignified about it. She has certainly said that 3 of them were very close on the show, but she doesn't get drawn into it, even though everyone tries, and particularly your good friend on Watch What Happens Next, Watch What Happens Live,
Live.
whatever it's called. What I find interesting with that one is how, I mean, obviously Sarah Jessica Parker playing Carrie Bradshaw, Kim Cattrall playing Samantha Jones on Sex and the City. To watch reruns where they are so close and they just, you've got to give it to them. If they were feuding, and of course it dates back, doesn't it? Because they, of course, everyone tries to bring a story up, and it's that Kim Cattrall wanted the original Carrie Bradshaw role, and then Sarah Jessica Parker. And this is all the media hyping up why this feud has, kind of been around for so long. But it is then very interesting to go back and watch a show that you love and 2 characters that you love because of their friendship, but knowing behind the scenes that they were feuding. Then fast forward to Just Like That, where Kim Cattrall doesn't get asked to come back, and Sarah Jessica Parker talks about that and says, it wouldn't have felt right because there was so much documented history between Kim Cattrall and the show. But then they have to obviously write into the show what's happened to Samantha Jones. So they kind of write in that, she's moved to London, but they don't speak to her anymore. So there's kind of an implied maybe, there's not an implied feud. There is a feud, and it's to do with publicity, I think, around one of Carrie's books. So you've got all that happening. Then you get the cameo in the last episode of the most recent season, which, of course, there was the big hype that there was going to be this cameo, which is just Samantha Jones calling Carrie from a car. But then you read that the only way, Kim Cattrall, of course, had to come out and say that the head of HBO rang her and said, how can I make this happen? and that the only way she would do it is if she didn't have, I think, anything to do with oh my gosh, Patrick, what's his name? The creator.
Michael Patrick King.
Mike, see, I was going to say, I was going to say Michael Patrick Harris, Michael Patrick King,
That's
and the
Neil
cast
Patrick Harris.
that she had to be styled by
Patricia
Patricia.
Field.
Patricia Field, of course, the stylist for Sex and the City, but she doesn't style just like that, but she does style a show that Kim Cattrall's on. So there was all these conditions around how Kim Cattrall would do it. So it's very removed, but then we've got to watch it kind of as if we just forget all that stuff that we've written about, and now we just believe that Samantha Jones is actually ringing Carrie Bradshaw.
So one thing we need to say is that you mentioned that Kim Cattrall wasn't asked to come back to and just like that, just because she'd made it a very firm point after the second film of Sex and the City that she would never go back to the franchise.
Correct.
So it wasn't so much that they said, oh no, we're not having her. It was that she'd already made it super clear that there was no way she would ever go back to that character.
Exactly. And that's what Sarah Jessica Parker said. There'd been so much documented history from her that it wouldn't feel, it wouldn't be right to bring her in when she'd been so public about the fact she'd never come back. But then suddenly that gets forgotten and she comes back for this cameo. But is it worth having the cameo? Because it kind of just becomes a story in itself, which I guess is good publicity for the show. Mm-hmm. But when we know these characters are feuding, So look, I mean, I do think it's weird, isn't it? Because I want to say that Sarah Jessica Parker has been quite dignified in her reaction and her handling of it. But that, am I then by saying that you should silence someone? If Kim Cattrall really felt aggrieved, and I do feel in the response to Sarah Jessica Parker's tweet, I mean, it felt really raw, those emotions of Kim Cattrall, and the fact that, this is obviously a situation that she had discussed with her family. Her mum knew about it. Her mum had given her advice. I don't, whether it was intentional from any of them that this environment was created, you can't not feel an honesty and a rawness in the way Kim Cattrall responded. And maybe she did feel like, her family's grief was being hijacked by someone to look like the goody two-shoes, and she'd just had enough,
So who do you side with? You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer. So far,
I'll go with the numbers. I'll go with the numbers of Sarah Jessica Parker, Kristen Davis, and oh God! See, I've had another
Cynthia Nixon.
See, listeners, this is a problem. I'm doing this in my evening. I usually record this podcast in the morning. I must be. My brain is winding down.
Well, I forgive you for that. I do realize going into this that we agree on very few of these. And I also I have to say something about, I'm not going to say mob mentality, but going by numbers as an indicator of, more people are against this person, that must mean that they're right. I'm not always sure about that.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So
you're putting me under pressure, and I'm just
I'm what I meant to say. Because I've been thinking long and hard about that, not for Sex and the City, but for Desperate Housewives. And I've kind of been really, we'll never know, because Terry Hatcher has said that she will never say more about anything that's happened on the set of Desperate Housewives that may have created a situation where she distanced herself from, namely Eva Longoria, Marcia Cross, and Felicity Huffman. So, and what was also very interesting is that there are some people who don't take sides, because when all of those pandemic time Zooms were happening with bringing stars onto everyone's own little, bubble and having all these shows, reunion shows, Vanessa Williams, who was brought onto Desperate Housewives on season 7 and season 8. I love Vanessa Williams. She was brought on, and during the pandemic, she participated in a reunion of the Desperate Housewives actresses that did not feature Felicity Huffman or Terry Hatcher, but that had all the other ones. So, Marcia Cross, Eva Longoria, Dana Delaney, Vanessa Williams, and Brenda Strong.
Yeah.
So all five of them together without Terry. And then Vanessa Williams was also on a one-on-one, one-to-one kind of situation that Terry Hatcher was doing. So there were still some people that weren't picking sides, and Vanessa Williams, just love her. But there's something that we have to come to terms with, the fact that we may not never know what went down. Look at
Correct.
Charmed, and that was going to be my next one.
Yes. Just before we get on to Charmed, absolutely, we may never know, and we don't actually have to know. It's not our business. And
No.
And this whole kind of pitting people in these feuds, I think, I don't know, what role do they play? And yeah, I mean, in life, we all have friendships that have ups and downs. You have angst with friends or colleagues. The problem is, if you're in the public eye, that gets played out in the public eye.
Absolutely. Yes. And, we were saying we may never find out, but look at Charmed. We knew something had gone down, and
Yes.
it took a quarter of a century for both Shannon Doherty,
Yes.
well, not even both. Shannon Doherty, Alyssa Milano, and Holly Marie Combs actually came out and told their side of the story.
Yes.
We're not going to use told their truth, because
No, that's right.
we're not huge fans of that expression.
No.
But they came out and gave their side of the story, which was very interesting, because it also raises the question of, we were all loving these shows and thinking these people were having the time of their lives.
Yes.
Putting these together. I mean, Charmed was, we're talking probably about the three most significant shows to have female-only leads in modern television history. Before that, it was Charlie's Angels and the Golden Girls, as kind of that level of popularity. But then Charmed, and within a few years of each other, Charmed, Sex and the City, and Desperate Housewives came about. And it also raises the question of how much our experience as viewers is tainted by the revelation of these feuds and these backstage difficulties, and that people were really struggling to even go to work in the morning because the environment felt so negative for them.
And I'm interested to talk about the and because I think podcasts have played quite a significant role in what we found out about the Charmed situation, and Beverly Hills 90210, which I want to talk about after, is what role podcasts are now playing when these actors have this voice. I mean, they've always had a voice, but podcasts, and they're sort of, I mean, I kind of liken podcasts a bit to the sort of the commentary you used to get on a DVD, which we don't get anymore because we don't buy DVDs, and you don't really get them on streaming services, but you would find out so much on those commentary versions.
And silence as well. Can I say something about this?
Yes.
If you watch, there is a version, there's a DVD set of one of the seasons of Desperate Housewives where all four leads, so Terry Hatcher, Felicity Huffman, Eva Longoria, and Marcia Cross, comment on one specific episode of The Housewives. So I think it's an episode of their choice.
Yes.
And you do not hear a single word said by Marcia Cross, Felicity Huffman, and Eva Longoria about Terry Hatcher in all of the commentary. Every single one of those three episodes. So, and I'm not saying good or bad. I have to say that silence sometimes speaks louder than words.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the whole, that's the silence is deafening.
But
Um,
you raise a good point about the podcast because I
yes,
feel like it is a format that people can, and how podcast is also instrumentalized because some people may have an agenda and say,
yes,
okay, this is my time to actually, work on this agenda and
yes.
uh, go use this format to actually say things that I want to say. So can you call it instrumentalized? I'm not quite sure. But if you're just going to do, setting the record straight after setting the record straight, you are using the format for a very specific purpose.
Absolutely. And of course, in the case of Charmed, you've kind of got two against one. So
Well,
two
three
talking on
against
a,
one, really, because Rose McGowan has come,
yeah, okay.
in support of Shannon Doherty. I mean,
Yes,
they appear on panels, all of them together, and then on the next
except
day,
Alyssa Milano. Yeah.
Alyssa Milano will be on stage alone. I think Alyssa
Yes.
Milano, for many, many years, said pretty much nothing about this.
Mm,
And then when Shannon Doherty left the show and it was clear that something had gone down. And then I think Holly Marie, if you listen to Shannon Doherty's podcast, you
yes.
do learn a lot about Holly Marie Combs and what she had to go through because the show was built around Shannon Doherty.
Yes.
Holly Marie Combs joined the show because of also her friendship with Shannon, but Alyssa Milano was a replacement because there was another actress who was supposed to play the role of Phoebe, and she pulled out. And that's when they went and got Alyssa Milano, who was appearing on Melrose Place, produced. So Aaron Spelling went and got um, Alyssa Milano to play the role of Phoebe. Um, from a viewer's perspective, what a stellar,
Yes.
brilliant, literally magical cast.
Yes, and I was just going to say to for those of you who don't know the situation, it's come out that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Alyssa Milano went and sort of forced the producer's hands to sack Shannon Doherty.
Yes and no. That's what it comes across as if you listen to Shannon Doherty and now Holly Marie Combs. But it also feels like Alyssa Milano was maybe put in a position where she had to go into mediation,
Mm,
and Shannon and Holly allegedly refused to have anything to do with that mediation because they could see it coming that the outcome was not going to be good. And it also raises the question of child stars, and we've spoken about this in previous episodes, supporting their entire families. And I
yes.
mean, they were young adults at that time, but they were
Oh,
still, the breadwinner for
the
their
pressure on
families.
them. Yes.
And how it appears now that, Alyssa Milano is being held responsible for being the reason that
Mm,
Shannon couldn't support her family anymore.
yes.
Um, this is an incredibly complicated, I think, situation from an outsider's perspective. And we're not going to, I mean, all of these interviews, we're not going to find a resolution here. And that's
No.
not the purpose. Our purpose is to analyze how this has come about. And podcast has played an important role because Shannon's podcast really kind of, I'm not going to say reignited because these were things that had never been said before,
Yes.
but added another layer of information and complexity to the situation.
Yes. And Shannon's, also had people from 90210 on. And she had an episode with Jason Priestley, and they talked about, because there was always those rumors that Shannon was difficult on set. She didn't get on, she, was late. She didn't get along with the other sort of thing. And Shannon has come out on her podcast when talking to Jason Priestley saying, I was those things, but I actually had all this stuff going on at home with her partner, that she was, terrified to leave him because there was substance abuse. And Jason Priestley said, we had no idea. I wish we had known that you were going through all of this, which then was flowing into the behavior on the set, because we would have been able to support you. So I thought that was a really interesting conversation. I mean, I think that was just last year or early this year, that episode. So, it's kind of also providing a context of people being able to even to their co-stars or the people that these feuds were with, kind of explaining their actions. And that, I think it just teaches us that there's so much more to that, just the face value of a feud or the face
Right.
value of someone's behavior, because
Well,
there sometimes is stuff going on behind the scenes.
because it would have been easy. I mean, and it was easy at the time, and no one looked further into the situation of saying, well, Shannon Doherty was fired from Beverly Hills 90210, and then she left Charmed. She must be the problem.
Correct.
She
Yes.
must be the only problem. What I also really appreciate about the format of the podcast, not the podcast that we do, because we are here to provide a certain perspective, and it's not like we're interviewing each
No.
other. What I also love is the podcast kind of kills the middleman.
Yes.
We will talk about the interviewer's position, and we've already spoken about it. But I'm sure a lot of people would have loved a sit-down interview with Shannon Doherty and have all of those questions answered for them. But
Yeah.
then it puts the focus on the interviewer more than it does on the actual person who is being interviewed and delivering their version of the story. So I
Correct.
love, and I mean, kudos to Shannon Doherty for going into, making her own podcast and creating her own content, because I feel that the impact was much bigger with her as the
Yes.
anchor of her podcast than it would have been with any sit down interview she could have given. And that kind of raises a question of interviewers are not really needed anymore. We'd seen that in a lot of instances, direct communication with the public.
Yes.
But I think the podcast takes it a step further because the interview is a very specific format.
That's right. And people are able to take control of their narrative and take control of their story without the risk of, the questions being asked, the sound bites, the way it's edited. So they, as you say, they cut out that middleman. And I think it's really interesting because I think we're getting sort of the resolution of some feuds. We're getting the reignition of some feuds. And we're getting the behind the scenes of some as well. Have we got any more on the list?
I mean, I have a very long list, but uh, if you think about Will Smith and Janet Hubert, who played Aunt Viv in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's first few seasons, and how The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's reunion show that aired a few years ago had the two actresses who portrayed Aunt Viv, and Janet Hubert made a much bigger impact than Daphne Maxwell Reid, who came for the later seasons, and whose role was much less than when Aunt Viv was portrayed by Janet Hubert. And that sit-down moment between Janet Hubert and Will Smith, Janet Hubert saying to Will Smith, you literally, you killed my career by saying I was, and that cuts like a knife because she said, calling a Black woman difficult is the kiss of death.
Yes.
So I felt it was an incredibly powerful moment it always felt like this kind of feud that went away, but it kind of had not an impact on Will Smith's career, but it kind of killed Janet Hubert's career.
Yes.
So,
but that goes back to what we were saying before, even with Taylor and writing the song about Kim, well, the alleged song about Kim, that even though we think it's gone away, it's still obviously playing on her mind. Now, I mean, we don't know when she wrote this song and if she's just recorded it as part of this album, but I think it's the same with Aunt Viv, that we think it's gone away. I know it's a different context because we're saying that her career was ruined by it. But, these things, once again, these are real people. And, when we talk about feuds, I have a real issue with a certain type of reality show. I mean, I like a lot of reality shows, but I really don't like things like The Bachelor, Married at First Sight, because of these manufactured feuds, well, not manufactured, but these manipulated feuds and the way they pit people against each other. But these are still people, they're still humans with feelings and with trauma. And we certainly know sometimes people with background, with trauma in their backgrounds, are put in these really toxic environments that this pitting against
There's
each other.
no, that's because there's no narrative without a villain. People
Oh,
need villain. And if
absolutely.
you have a villain, you need a victim. And
Of
and
course.
these shows, because they need a villain and a victim, and you know what? That can be flipped as well. The villain can become the victim at any given point and vice versa.
Yes, but I think the difference with the dating ones is and the Real Housewives is it's done within the show. If you look at something like Survivor, you definitely have, they've picked from at the start who's going to be the villain, who's going to be the victim, who's going to be this, who's going to be that. But that's played out in the editing and it's aired. Now, obviously, it affects those people's profile, but these other reality shows, it's within the show. You've got them being pitted against each other in scenes. You've got circumstances being constructed to pit themselves, someone being told one thing so that they go at the other person, which I think is
Yes,
different to something like Survivor, where it's still edited to have those elements. But when they're in the moment, they don't know these, they're being cast as certain characters. Um,
right.
and I think it's incredibly toxic. And I think it is, I just think it's lazy kind of entertainment, because you're
Mhm.
right, there's no story, so they've got to create these stories. But it goes back to, these are still people, and it still impacts their lives.
Absolutely. I think, which is why I've spoken about this as well, in terms of I do enjoy that some of these shows actually have reunions that kind of, as artificial as they look and sound, kind of provide some kind of closure. Literally putting an end to a
Mm.
storyline, as fake and manufactured as it may be. And I mean, gosh, I've sort of fantasized over the years about, you work at an event and you have some relationships with people. And I would like, wouldn't it be great if we actually had a reunion at the end of that event and kind of, dressed up? And maybe I've said this in a previous episode as well, but I will say it again, that if we kind of dressed up and had a mediators sit and ask us questions and kind of hash it out and kind of come to a resolution and a conclusion of things where everything that we wanted to say has been said. And I've said, I keep going on about the same things of, you don't want to leave an environment with the bitter aftertaste in your mouth of, I should have said something, I
Yes.
would have done something. And that's when you kind of get those kinds of closures. And certainly we're talking about Feuds today. And as a sensitive person who is
Yes.
a fan of people and a loyal fan of some people, certainly I still feel some of the negativity of some of those feuds that for me in my head are still not resolved when people must have moved on
Yes.
years ago.
Yeah. Oh, you hear people talk about that, and I'm trying to think. I've heard celebrities talk about how they've gone up to someone and apologized for the way they spoke to them, and the person went, "Oh, I don't even remember," and then they said they
Right.
were then even more embarrassed. But getting back to those reunion shows, see, I look at it very differently. I don't think they're closure. I think they are just another part of that entertainment, that manufacturing of pitting against people against each other, and it sets the show up for the next season. And look, the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills had 3 parts to the last reunion. And it just, and do we also expect that these people don't see each other in between the reunions because some of them are supposedly good friends? I just you could say these people know what they're getting themselves into, and certainly
Mhm.
someone like Kyle, who's been on it from the start, knows that well. But then you sort of get these other stories like that, say, Elisa Vanderpump, who's then, there's stories about what she thinks popping up in the press. So you've got these side feuds kind of going around the edges, and that's a really interesting thing of people getting on, kind of jumping and getting involved in the feud. And one that springs to mind, and sort of moving off the pure entertainment, is J.K. Rowling versus some of the actors from Harry Potter
Yes.
about her stance on the trans community. And, just recently, Piers Morgan has got himself involved, saying, they're ungrateful brats or selfish brats or something like that, because as if Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson owe J.K. Rowling something. But if you read, and they've come out in support of the trans community, and if you read about it, Daniel Radcliffe worked with an LGBTQI charity, and he felt that, it was his place to come out and really show his support. And he comes out and he clearly says, the woman that we met who wrote these books, we really liked, and of course our careers wouldn't be anything without these books, but we still have to stand up for what we believe in.
And
But
people
this has become a
change.
feud that everyone else is getting involved in now.
And people change. The people that you worked with 20 years ago and had a great relationship with or owe something to back in the day can
Yes.
become completely different people and turn on you and the world in a split second. And does it mean that you have to does it mean that you have to support them,
If it goes
without?
against your morals and ethics and your values.
Absolutely.
And I think
And
that
then,
we have these assumptions that they must have been hanging out with J.K. Rowling every day on set. Well, I mean, they weren't. She wrote the
well,
books, but she
because in
wasn't.
people's psyche, we associate them to something that is so big and powerful
Yes,
that we want to believe as an audience, and the media has certainly portrayed it that way as well, that we want to believe that those are linked forever in a
exactly.
way where there would be no common sense.
That's
I mean,
right.
common sense must kick in whenever a
Yes,
situation like this
yes.
comes on specifically if you think about Emma Watson and
Mm.
how vocal she is about so many different issues
Hmm.
as well. Obviously, she was not gonna sit and not say anything about what she felt was right or
Absolutely.
wrong.
And correct. And as I said, with Daniel Radcliffe, he'd worked with young people in this charity. Of course, he's going to support them. But, now people like Piers gets himself involved in a lot of feuds, but, it's this weird feud whereas I don't actually see it as a feud between J.K. Rowling and Emma Watson and Daniel Radcliffe. I actually see it around differences of um, values, and the way they view society, um, because of her stance against the trans community.
Hmm. I mean, it's ongoing, so
Yes,
there
it
might
is
be a few
ongoing.
more
It
chapters
is
to this
ongoing.
story. Let's see what they bring. But I want to talk about resolution because I'm also conscious of time and how much
Yes.
time we've got left. I want to talk about resolution and how much as bystanders and observers of feuds we are owed the resolution component of a feud, or is just forgetting about it enough. And I have one in my head that really has sat with me, and it's the feud between Beyonce and Kelly and
Mm-hmm.
Latoya and Latavia in Destiny's Child. Can we call it a feud? Basically, Beyonce and Kelly, well, is Matthew Knowles' daughter. He was the
Yes.
manager of Destiny's Child. And at one point, after the second album came out, Latoya and Latavia felt that they didn't want Matthew Knowles as their manager anymore. So they expressed that wish, um, let's say, well they could at that time. We don't know that much more about it. And then that was the end of Destiny's Child as their initial quartet
Yes.
kind of format. Um, and a whole lot of non-disclosure stuff is involved in this story. And it feels like now all of them are good, but I feel like we never actually got to the resolution as bystanders because so much of it played out in the press and on MTV, and Beyonce and Kelly telling their version of the story, and Latoya and Latavia telling their version of the same story. And now it feels like things are okay between them, but I kind of wanted like, because it really felt in retrospect that Latoya and Latavia's voice was shut down, and that
Yes.
basically because Matthew had the power over the group, he kind of got rid of them. And Beyonce and Kelly never came out since then to say anything about, to revisit
Yes.
that story and say, this is what happened. Any kind of apology, that we never saw that either.
Mm.
So it kind of feels like that one also feels like unfinished business to me.
So let me put this to you. How would you as the viewer want it to be resolved?
How would I want
Do
it to
you
be
want a
resolved?
sit-down interview with Oprah?
I wouldn't want to sit down interview with Oprah, and I think that's too late now. But I think that I don't know what I don't know what I want, but I feel, I've said this many times on the show, if you've done someone wrong, you should apologize to them in the same forum where the story played out.
Yes.
So I feel that there has been some of that there. And there's this great episode of The Big Bang Theory where people realize that Sheldon cannot deal with anything that doesn't come to an end.
Yes.
So Amy has him go through all these games and stuff where she cuts them before the end. I feel there may well be a bit of that for me in there.
Yes.
And but then how much do we want to know? Did we actually really
Correct.
need that
Exactly.
extra layer of Alyssa Milano and Shannon Doherty?
Well, that's right. Exactly. I mean, talking about resolutions, I think one of the best ones was Katy Perry going to Taylor Swift's concert in Sydney.
Hmm.
Because I mean, obviously, I can say a big deal wasn't made out of it. I mean, of course, a big deal was made out of it because it was all the photos, but it kind of was like, and and vision of her singing singing to Bad Blood, because we didn't need a big declaration that everything was okay. It was by her showing up. Now, whether it is okay or she just wanted to go and hang out with Rita Ora, I'm not sure, but it was enough to kind of go, okay, they're all fine. Let's move on.
I
Um,
want to hang out with Rita Ora.
I want
Yes.
to bring up another feud, which,
Yes.
and I am conscious of time, so we will start wrapping this up because there's so many feuds we haven't talked about. I mean, we haven't gone into Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. We haven't gone into the Gallagher brothers in Oasis. We haven't gone into Linda Evans and Joan Collins on Dynasty. I mean, there's so many iconic feuds. So listeners, don't think we've
They're
forgotten
from
about
a
those.
different era, though. Those ones are from a different era. I think Liam and Noel, I very
It's
briefly,
ongoing.
it is ongoing. And is it a feud if it's two members of I mean, if it's two
Oh,
brothers,
I think
two
it's
members
definitely a
of the same
feud.
family?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't have an answer for that, but because
But
I read
then,
those
everyone's
explanations where it was more clans, but then a clan
yes,
can be two different brothers and their own families.
absolutely. And I think the
Hmm.
fascination with the Gallagher brothers is, what's one going to say about the other and what's going to happen next? And if, is there going to be this big Oasis reunion? Um,
Well, let's settle it once and for all. Are you more Wonderwall or are you more Don't Look Back in Anger?
oh, oh, um, can I be Champagne Supernova?
You can you can absolutely be Champagne Supernova. It's one of my favorite songs. But if you think about those two, I'm definitely Don't Look Back in Anger. I love
Mm,
that song so much.
mm.
And Wonderwall is such a huge moment in Britpop, the
Yes.
Britpop of the late 90s.
I
But Don't Look Back in Anger encapsulates, I think, so much more of the Britpop sound than
oh
Wonderwall does.
yes.
So I love Don't Look Back in Anger. But Champagne Supernova any day.
I still regret we didn't buy that Oasis CD in the service station when we were driving on our little road trip in Australia.
There are many things that we did not buy on
We
that
did not
I
buy.
wish we had.
We did not buy chips at Red Rooster, and I'm still recovering from that incident. That's my
And
Red
I
Rooster.
did not buy, and I didn't buy the tea cozy
Well,
at
you
that little
didn't.
store
And it was
either.
closed on the Tuesdays. So there we go. Anyone going to Aries Inlet, the shops close on a Tuesday. One that I find kind of just sort of shows how at face value you can take feuds is 50 Cent and Ja Rule. So I'm not in the rap world. I don't follow the rap music. I don't know a lot about the rap culture. I certainly know there are some very steeped, well, I mean, we know East Coast versus West Coast in the rap culture. And I mean, we're not going to go into the documented rivalries there and in fact deaths, but there's a clip that always comes up on my algorithms, and it's probably because I keep watching it, so it just keeps coming up, is
Fair enough.
sent on Stephen Colbert. And he's already talked about, might be a previous interview, he's talked about his feud with Ja Rule and the fact that he bought the first 4 rows of tickets for a Ja Rule concert so that when he came out, he wouldn't have anyone in the first 4 rows to play to, which I mean, but in telling this story, he also says the tickets were like on a coupon and they're only $15. So, I mean, he's putting Ja Rule down in so many places. So, I mean, I'm watching this clip. Then he's on a segment with Stephen Colbert where Stephen Colbert's asking 50 Cent or, Curtis James Jackson, because they talk about when he's 50 Cent and when he's Curtis. And he's asking him questions like, how long can you keep your Christmas decorations up for and who pays on a first date? And, they're really funny. And 50 Cent is really funny with his answers. And Stephen Colbert says, say one nice thing about Ja Rule. And 50 Cent says, well, he's alive. And of course, you just burst out laughing. But then you realize the context of a comment saying he's still alive is quite a menacing comment,
I know.
particularly if you look at the history of Ja Rule and why that feud is. And I think it goes back to like 99 or something when Ja Rule was robbed, I think, by an associate of 50 Cent and attacked. And so there's all this kind of quite, there's some violence in the feud along the years. So there's this very sort of funny joke, flippant, well, he's alive, and you laugh. And then you realize, actually, the layers in this, that's actually quite a menacing comment.
I mean,
I've stunned
it's a
you.
talk show. Look, it's a talk show, and I guess we'll never know. I think 50 Cent or Curtis is an incredibly intelligent, smart, articulate, witty,
Funny, very
funny
funny. I
person.
recommend anyone to go on. Actually, I might try and find the clip and share it to our Instagram because he is very funny in this interview. But yeah, it's just
We,
interesting even reading the comments in YouTube of everyone going, oh, that's hilarious. But then you kind of really think about the comment of,
I
well,
think
he's basically saying, well, he hasn't been murdered.
that's right.
Mm.
Well, I think that opens up a whole new window into feuds in the rap world. And if you think about the most recent one between Kendrick Lamar and Drake, it is an ongoing thing of diss track after diss track. And without going into the specifics of it, I think the Kendrick Lamar and Drake, although they're both rap artists, couldn't be further apart from each other in terms of their positioning and in terms of their narrative when it comes to their craft, and also in terms of cultural backgrounds. So I think there's a whole heap of layers going into
Yes.
those, specifically because it's not so much about two people not getting along, it's two people not approving of the other's output into the world in terms of
Yes.
what they represent. So I
And
think
actually,
that's,
yeah, I was
go
reading a
ahead, go
really
ahead.
interesting article, and it was talking about that feud in particular, but talking about that in rap music. And once again, I'm speaking about this not being someone in that world and knowing a lot about rap music, but that women are often the collateral damage in those feuds because they're the ones that get mentioned in these diss tracks. And if you think about Eminem and Machine Gun Kelly, that feud started over Machine Gun Kelly commenting on Eminem's daughter, and then the diss tracks have gone back and forth. So that's a really interesting role of how women are brought into those rap feuds and how they become that collateral damage, because they're the ones that are mentioned, and they're the ones that are the disparaging marks are sort of, or they're talked about like property, kind of in these tracks back and forth.
Yeah, and I feel that beyond that, which is why I say that it's a different kind of feud, because it doesn't have to do with two people not getting along. There's so many more layers to
Oh,
that
absolutely.
conversation than just
Yes.
two people not getting
Yeah.
along. But I want to throw it back to an article an opinion piece that I saw on Rolling Stone, the website of the magazine, that was like taking a jab at this diss track war that is going on between Kendrick Lamar and Drake, saying, I don't verbatim, it said something about how can we get involved in a rap war when there's a real war, going on in the
Yes.
world. Um, and I felt that that kind of felt to me as a little not hypocritical, but it came off as untimely in terms of comparisons, also because there's always wars somewhere around
Yes.
the world.
Yep.
And why is it kind of felt like what we call moral relativism here,
Yes.
because you find something stupid enough and take it, well, for some people, for the people who was
Of
writing the
course.
opinion piece, certainly, but something I'm not going to say stupid, but trivial enough that you're going to compare it with something that you can't compare it with.
Yes.
So I felt that that was an easy jab at something, but at the same time, it does raise the question of, being able to focus on these things when other more
Yes.
important things are happening.
Yes. I mean, and once again, this is all down to the media we read, which obviously gives a certain opinion, but also the people we follow or the things we watch, impact our algorithms. But I was certainly getting a lot of stuff yesterday around sort of that juxtaposition of what's going on in the Middle East and then the green carpet at the Met Gala. And there was a lot of commentary. Now, obviously, that's because I must, it's informed by which media I follow and what kind of people in the algorithms, as I said. But you do get those juxtapositions of things, and where people just feel, why are we worrying about this, or why are we paying attention to people spending $75,000 a ticket to the Met Gala, when
Mm-hmm.
there's particularly at this point in time, this very point in time of what's going on in the Middle East.
All the more interesting for me as as a person of Armenian Lebanese descent, because I can trace it back to growing up. I don't think there's ever been a time in my life when nothing was happening either with my Lebanese heritage or with my Armenian heritage that,
Yes.
kind of may have been a trigger of
Yes.
thinking, why am I enjoying this when this is taking place? You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yes.
So I felt it was a little easy to kind of pull
Of
that
course.
argument now,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
at the same time, I really understand it, because when you come from communities that have had to face repeatedly war, and when you have a heavy family history as well,
Yes.
that's a burden you carry with you. And I want to say this, very simply, I'm not loading my comments here. I just want to give my humble opinion about this, is that it is something you carry and something that you struggle with all the
Yes.
time, which
Yeah.
is enjoying things when more serious things are
Of
happening
course.
in the background
Of
of
course.
your own life and of your own
Yes.
culture. And
Yeah.
it's, I think, something I hope some people listening can relate to this, because, and it doesn't have to be war. It can be a whole
No.
heap of
Of
it
course.
can be a
Yes.
whole heap of things.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
not fitting where you are and all those, but it's
Yes,
always two things that have to live together in your headspace.
that's right. Yep. Well, conscious of time, I just
Hmm.
to wrap up, I mean, obviously, feuds are fascinating. And I mean, Ryan Murphy has got his anthology series, Feuds, which started off
Yes.
with Joan Crawford and Bette Davis. The second one was Capote versus the Swans, Truman Capote versus the socialite Swans. And he wrote an article in Esquire published it. Named the article was named after the restaurant they used to meet, and he basically aired their kind of life, which turned into a feud. So there's certainly, I mean, feuds continue to captivate people. But I would like to wrap up with three special mentions of feuds that I think have given us some iconic things in pop culture. The first one, of course, being Solange Knowles and Jay-Z in the lift following in the Met Gala. And really Becky with the good hair, I think we can realize came from that. I would also like to pay special mention to ABBA and the song The Winner Takes It All, that of course has widely been talked about as the song about their respective divorces. The Benny and Bjorn say it actually wasn't about that, it was a fictionalized song, but I mean that is a pretty raw song to sing when you have just broken up with your partner who you're still in the band with. And then, of course, Fleetwood Mac's feuds that resulted in the album Rumours, which is one of the greatest albums of all time. So, sometimes good things come from feuds.
Yes, absolutely. I do want to take, I would like to conclude with Ryan Murphy, who's a very good example of,
Ah,
I think, narratives being brought into the world when other things were happening. And I find it a little funny that Ryan Murphy would go into the business of feuds when probably one of the biggest ones in recent years was the one between Leah Michele and Naya Rivera on Glee.
mm-hmm.
And specifically with everything else that came out of that show. I mean, we spoke about Quiet on Set and all the things that happened at Nickelodeon in the past couple of shows, but Glee is a good example as well of people coming out and having given the world a show about positivity and not shying away from issues that teenagers were facing.
Well, I was going to
And
say inclusivity too.
inclusivity. And I think that finding out that so much had been so difficult for the people who were actually acting on that show, and um, the instances of bullying that have been mentioned, I think it's quite, I don't know if we can use ironic in that kind of
Mm,
context, but
mm.
Ryan Murphy, it feels the only time I ever saw Ryan Murphy say anything about this was on Watch What Happens Live when he was asked about
Our oracle for all good things.
but that was a good indicator because he was asked about, yeah, absolutely. He was asked about,
We'll have Andy Cohen on one of these episodes.
yes, please, Andy, if you're listening. Um, So Ryan Murphy was asked about the most difficult or the most intense moment of feuding he saw between Naya Rivera
Mm.
and Leah Michele, and Ryan Murphy pled the fifth because that was the part of the segment where they get asked three questions and can plead the fifth to only one of those questions.
Yes.
So Ryan Murphy pled the fifth for that. And I feel it also raises the question of accountability and creating a work environment
Yes.
that is positive and that is monitored enough for those feuds to not develop.
Well, it's no different to, leaders creating culture
Yes, absolutely.
in the workplace. Mm.
Absolutely. So it kind of ties in also with these environments where everything is intense and heightened. And we've spoken
Yes,
about this coming from the world of events. And we get to witness that because it's fast and furious and only happens for a few weeks. So you
exactly.
have to deliver. But in that instance, I find some kind of irony in
Mhm.
creating narratives about feuds and kind of looking into who's wrong and who's right and what's wrong or not,
Yes,
when really in the own environments that you've created, were you able to do that?
yes. I think that's a good place to end. We'll ask
Thank
him
you.
that question when he comes on.
Yes, please. We
So that,
shall.
well, I mean, there's so much more we could talk about feuds, but that takes us to time. Uh,
Yes,
and we're still talking, so that's a positive. We're still
we
talking.
are. Yes, we're still. Well, we should. I mean, what have we got other than talking to kind of
That's
come to
right.
terms with
I
these
mean,
issues?
maybe we'll need an episode about our big declaration of our resolution of some of the feuds we disagree on.
That's
But
right.
of course, it brings us to the end of the episode. I believe the Tina Arena jar. I listened to the last episode. I think we're at about $10, and there's been a
Hmm.
couple of mentions tonight, so I'm going to put it at $12.
Sounds
So
good.
we're ticking along. Pop culture moment of the week to wrap up.
Pop culture moment of the week for me. It was a busy weekend. I'm gonna tell you that. So I was gonna go kind of Met Gala maybe,
Mm,
but I'm gonna go busy pop weekend because I'm surprised that the pop planet didn't kind of blow up because Madonna ended her tour, Kylie and ended her Vegas residency, and Dua Lipa hosted SNL on the same weekend. So talk about more, can you find a more glorious weekend for the pop world? And then um, look, Madonna's show aired on TV. I watched the show. It was glorious. It showed her as powerful as ever and vulnerable and unapologetic, which I very much enjoyed. I think Dua Lipa is really represents something
mm,
that both Madonna and Kylie Minogue have in them, which I really enjoy. And it's good to see that there are some real pop artists out there that kind of embody what Kylie and Madonna have embodied and continue to.
yes,
Um, and Kylie's American era just keeps kind of
it
going
does.
on. And so she wrapped her residency and she was at the Met Gala. I'll say, I posted about this on socials of people kind of feel like I'm Kylie Minogue's stylist. And when they don't like her outfits, they send me
We'd
messages.
like to have a word with you.
I am I am not Kylie Minogue's stylist, but I did enjoy the diesel component of her
Mm,
outfit, which um, she wore a dress by Diesel, and it
yes.
tied in with Diesel's history of managing colors, and
Mm.
so I felt that was an interesting weekend. Although I do feel like the Met Gala sometimes is a perfect waste of really good oxygen, and
Well,
I'm not quite
has the
sure
Met
where
Gala
I
jumped?
stand about the event.
Has the Met Gala jumped the shark? Maybe we'll discuss that.
I think we
But
will.
yes. Uh, well, my pop culture moment of the week, and I had two people text me almost simultaneously. Well, I had a friend text me because his mum had texted from Wales to tell me, and my sister texted me at the same time, was of course the announcement of the final, well, the finale of Gavin and Stacey. Now, of
Hmm.
course, for those playing along at home, Gavin and Stacey hasn't been on air since 2019 when there was the Christmas special. So Gavin and Stacey starting in 2007, 2008, which included the Christmas special 2009. It came back for a one off 10 years later in 2019 for a Christmas special, which I think was just as good. I mean, I think they captured everything that we loved about Gavin and Stacey. And in fact, that Christmas special was watched by over 11 million people and actually broke their own viewing records and sort of was the biggest festive viewing success in over 10 years. And they've announced that there will be a Christmas special to play on Christmas Day or Boxing Day 2024. So Ruth Jones, James Corden posting a photo, which is exciting because if you're not a if you're not a Gavin and Stacey fan, I know people don't get it, but if you are a Gavin and Stacey fan, these characters are just in your hearts. I remember when I first watched the show, I think my mum kept saying, "Oh, you must watch this show, Gavin and Stacey." And I remember watching it, going, "Yeah, it's fine," but I didn't really laugh. And then I realized it's actually a show you don't have to laugh out loud. It's just a joyous show around family and relationships. So it's kind of, I feel sometimes like the world's in two parts, the Gavin and Stacey watchers and the non-Gavin and Stacey watchers. But it certainly is very exciting that there'll be this finale that no one asked for, but everyone's very excited about.
Well, sometimes the best things are the ones that you didn't ask for.
Exactly. And of course, the 2019 Christmas special was left on a bit of a cliff. Well, it was left on a big cliffhanger. So we'll see if, talking about resolutions, we'll see if it gets resolved in this. But that wraps up episode 5 of what did we call it?
And I was going to
Taking
say,
the feuds.
yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say, well, no one asked for our podcast, and here we are. But we appreciate
Yes, and we'll be
the
back in 10
positive
years for
feedback
our
we've
Christmas.
been getting.
We'll be back in 10 years for our Christmas special.
Yes, please. Well, let's have a few more in between, please.
Exactly. Well,
we still have heaps to talk about, judging from how
we do
long our conversations are.
We do. Well, on that note, you're Vicken.
I am
Georgie.
Vicken Park. Yes, yeah. And I'm coming to you from Louisville.
And I'm coming to you from Melbourne, but I'm about to head to bed, I think, at this fine late hour. You're just got your day starting.
That's right. The day is young.
And we look forward to chatting to you on our next episode of Drop It Like It's Pop. Don't forget to visit our Instagram page. We've also got links to our playlists. We've got our first one up, which is the crossover one, and we'll certainly be popping some more playlists up there. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
This has been Drop It Like It's Pop.
Be sure to follow us on our Instagram page at Drop Like It's Pop to have access to our latest episodes and playlists.
Until next time.